Okay, I have been talking all week, so my voice is a little bit crusty, but that's okay. We can get through. So I'm going to start talking about clean eating, which means I'm going to share my screen here. And then I'm going to go slideshow from the beginning. Okay, here we go. So today I'm going to talk about clean labels and kind of explain a little bit more of the history and the background about clean labels. It's probably going to be about, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes. And then again, like I said, you can ask questions about clean labels or feel, can somebody hear a lot of background noise with somebody muting? Let's see. Okay, I'm muted. There we go. So food ingredients have been used for many years.
It will take 7 to 10 minutes. Be at San Francisco Airport.
Ying Ying, looks like I keep muting you, and for some reason it keeps unmuting. Can you please stay muted for us? Thank you. Okay, so back to clean labels. So food ingredients have been used for many years to preserve flavor, blend foods, thicken foods, color foods, and they play an important role in reducing serious nutritional deficiencies as well. They help increase flavor availability of flavorful, nutritious, safe, convenient, colorful, and affordable foods that meet our expectations year-round. Year-round being an important part of this, that we have a lot of different foods year-round available to us, and it's something that's a big part of it is the type of food ingredients and preservatives that allow for that. In 2008, Michael Pollan wrote In Defense of Food, which subsequently turned into a PBS show. Since then, there's been a large shift towards consumers wanting free from foods, with his warning not to eat anything containing unpronounceable substances. In fact, according to a study conducted earlier last year, 1/3 of Americans believe that pesticides, food preservatives, and GMO foods cause serious health conditions. The clean label market is estimated to reach $47 billion in the United States alone by 2022, which is a 6% growth in 6 years. So this is clearly a large issue in the food industry. It's also of great interest to people that are paying attention to nutrition and labels. Today I'm going to review clean label in the industry, try to get people to understand a little bit more about the background and history, and just talk briefly about ingredients that were the original preservatives. So what does clean label mean? And you know, a lot of us probably have our own thought around what clean label means and what it represents and what it stands for, and that's probably part of our own interpretation to clean label. Clean label is actually not a scientific term. Rather, it is a consumer-driven term that has been broadly accepted by the food industry, as well as consumers, academics, and even now regulatory agencies. But what does it actually mean? Essentially, and I say essentially because, like I said, it's been a matter of up to our own interpretation, driven by food marketing and what they interpret as clean label. But essentially, clean label means making a product using as few ingredients as possible, and making sure those ingredients are items that consumers recognize and think of as wholesome, or ingredients that consumers might already use at home. So the goal is to seek out foods with easy to recognize ingredients. Note that it contains no artificial ingredients, no synthetic chemicals, and really to the food has become associated with trust. Food manufacturers put this label on, or some semblance of this label, to initiate trust with the consumer. And you'll see this is a green label, and green really associates natural with consumers as well. Early food preservation, we would not be, I don't know what, okay. Early food preservation, ancient practice was designed to prevent spoilage. And so it was using salting of meat and fish, adding sugar to canned foods, and using pickling of vegetables. So without food preservation, people very long time ago wouldn't even eat. I have a picture there of one of the earlier refrigerators. And think at that time, refrigeration was a really big deal. It was so new. And if we as consumers and people that eat didn't have things like refrigeration, they had to preserve the food. When food was available, like meat and fish, they salted it so that it ended up being available for a long period of time. They canned it so it was available for a long period of time, or pickled it. And there's lots of other ways that they preserved food so that they had food. They were able to preserve the food so it was available not just in the time that it was either foraged or picked, but well beyond that. So there's two types of food preservation. One is chemical preservation, which is adding ingredients to a food for the purpose of preventing damage. In this case, there are different types. You can oxidize a food, which keeps the color of foods. Many of us will see sulfur dioxide added to apricots, for example. Dried apricots are actually naturally brown, but most of us like the idea of seeing the natural color of an apricot, which is kind of, I guess, orangish, peachish. So ingredients are added to keep that color. Microbial, that inhibits the growth of microbes on food. This helps to really enhance food safety. And then food colors. Keep the color of food in some cases. Food colors also enhance shelf life. And then there's, of course, food colors that are added to just kind of, I guess, excite or interest the consumer. There's physical preservation, which is the process that inhibits a change to the ingredient. So the ingredients actually changed. Things like refrigeration or drying changed the ingredient, refrigeration and or freezing. So what you're doing is allowing the change to also preserve it and make that food last quite a bit longer. Oops. I'm realizing my mouse I have a brand new mouse and it's like so sensitive, which is, I guess, a good thing. Okay, so the original food preservatives, I'll let you guys all take a guess and say it in your head of what you think the two original food preservatives were. One was sugar and one was salt. Now these are kind of considered the two biggest offenders with processed foods, but you can see, without salt, meat and many other foods were not able to be preserved long ago without refrigeration. So looking at natural ingredients versus artificial additives, natural ingredients are derived from natural sources, things like soybeans and corn that provide lecithin to maintain product consistency. Beets are used in beet powder to be used as a food coloring. Those are naturally derived. Other ingredients that are not found in nature are therefore synthetically produced as artificial ingredients. But some ingredients found in nature can be manufactured artificially and produced more economically with greater purity, sometimes more consistent, than their more natural counterparts. So an example to that is vitamin C or ascorbic acid. Vitamin C and ascorbic acid are used as an antioxidant in food manufacturing. They can be created synthetically or derived from an orange or other high vitamin C foods. And so it's just a matter of maintaining consistency versus economics, but still can be very similar to its natural counterpart. So let's look at an example. What do you guys think this product is? The ingredients here are bleached wheat flour, niacin, iron, thiamine, mononitrate, riboflavin, folic acid, and an enzyme, which sounds really technical and processed, right? Does anyone want to throw in the chat box what they think it might be? This is, I don't see, there we go. I don't know if anyone's chatting because I'm having a hard time seeing it. Because my screen is shared.
You got
Okay.
one, it says white bread.
White bread, okay, good, very good guess.
Bleached flour.
Yeah, that's right.
Pasta.
Good old bleached flour. So it sounds really technical, but it's all-purpose bleached flour, and it's something you'd find in kitchen pantries around the globe. But it's got some unfamiliar or scientific terms, and those coupled with regulatory requirements around food labeling, a lot of consumers can very easily consider this staple too complicated or not wholesome. But if we delve into these ingredients, we've got just plain old wheat flour, but then we've got vitamin B3, which is known as niacin, iron, which is a mineral, thiamine, not mononitrate, which is vitamin B1, riboflavin, vitamin B5, I think, and folic acid, which is vitamin B9, and an enzyme, which helps keep the product stay on the shelf longer. So this is why it can be a little bit challenging when it comes to being too clean with your labels. If we look further, the Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, has jurisdiction over all preservatives, additives in the food industry. We do have an organization that mandates preservatives. The FDA mandates that preservatives cannot be used to conceal damage or inferiority of the product, make the food appear better than it is, or adversely affect the nutritive value of the food. The FDA actually maintains a list of over 3,000 ingredients in its database. They have something called GRAS, which is generally recognized as safe. This is regulated by the FDA and is defined as a reasonable certainty in the minds of competent scientists that the substance is not harmful under the intended conditions of use. So when a new product or ingredient comes out on the market, it has to go through FDA, and the FDA gives us this GRAS stamp of approval. Anything added to food must be listed on the label. So ingredients are listed in order of predominance, with ingredients in largest amounts are first. Some ingredients can be listed collectively as flavors or spices, but if it contains an allergen, the allergen name needs to be in the ingredient list. So that's just a little bit more about the ingredient and how the FDA requires it. So if you see something listed as flavors, usually they're all collectively combined together if they're of similar nature. And that's how the FDA provides its ruling. So let's take a look at some issues in terms of food ingredients that sort of are on top of mind for people. There's nitrates and nitrates, otherwise known as sodium nitrite or sodium nitrate. These are used in processed meats, Studies have been linked to eating large amounts of processed meat through the increased risk of colorectal cancer. Now note, a lot of these studies are looking at isolated ingredients and not looking at necessarily the entire diet. People that are eating large amounts of processed meats are probably not eating a lot of antioxidants, foods that fight free radicals, therefore cancer. So that's a big component to this. What's also of note, recent research is showing that even naturally occurring sodium nitrite and nitrate, which is found in celery powder or rosemary extract and added to a lot of all natural, I'm using air quotes here, all natural deli meats, has the same amount of sodium nitrate and nitrate as its not so natural counterpart. Sodium benzoate and sulfites they appear to be safe for most people, but may cause adverse reactions in others. BHA and BHT is listed by the National Toxicology Program as reasonably anticipated to be a human carcinogen. The FDA considers it GRAS substance in minute quantities. BHT is actually banned in Japan and the UK. But has been. So if you're just joining us, can you please mute your phone, your computer? Looks like everybody's muted in here. I don't know who is not muted. Okay, just muted. Okay, so BHA and BHT. BHT specifically has been banned in Japan and the UK, but has not been shown conclusively to be carcinogenic. BHA and BHT is meant to be an oxidizer, meaning it's meant to keep the fat in the product from oxidizing or becoming rancid. In some cases, vitamin E or alpha tocopherol can be used, but again, a lot of times cost is thought about, and then how long the product is meant to sit on the shelf. Finally, colors are always a question. General Mills removed all colors from their cereals, and there was such a drop in their sales that they added colors back to select cereals. So people recognize colors and associate them with certain foods. The FDA's Committee on Hypersensitivity to Food Constituents concluded in 1986 that FD&C yellow, number 5, might cause hives. There hasn't been any other conclusive evidence around colors. There are some groups that say that blue and red might be associated with mental health disorders, especially in kids, particularly ADHD, but again, non-conclusive in terms of quantity and or enough to push the FDA to make them not safe. And with that, I will stop here and let's open up for questions. I'm going to stop the share so that I can see the questions a little bit more easily. And Beth is here. Okay, looks like Beth's already answering some questions. Awesome, thank you. Any questions at this point that you want to either speak or type?
Where can we find a list of the preservatives and all the chemicals in foods off the labels?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't know if there's a conclusive or comprehensive list. when I worked for Cornell Dining for many years, and we tried to really initiate a clean label and initiative across campus, and I spent a lot of time researching. And what's the challenge? And that's why I started by saying this. The challenge really is that everyone has their own interpretation because it's a consumer-driven initiative, not a FDA or USDA-driven concept. So with that, everyone has their own interpretation. So Trader Joe's, for example, has a whole list of what they consider green, yellow, and red ingredients. And I'm sure I know the dietitians with Trader Joe's follows it exclusively. They're not allowed to use any of the red, and they use the ingredients in the yellow with caution. Panera has a great list. It's 50 exactly 50 ingredients that they exclude from their from any of the ingredients they use in their foods. And what's nice about what Panera did was they created this no list, and it's really pushed the whole industry to create new ingredients that are a little bit more clean. So Panera has a really great list, but then there's a lot of food manufacturing companies, as well as quick service restaurants and fast casual restaurants that have developed their own list, so to speak. And so it really what it comes down to is what's most important to you in terms of overall ingredients. The point in my slides was that, without preservatives, we wouldn't be able to eat most foods because we live in a world where we rely on a lot of processed foods. And even if we think about milk, if we were all getting milk from the cow and leaving it in our refrigerator, it probably wouldn't last more than 2 or 3 days. So, there's something to be said about the overall food processing, and then how well what are the decisions you make. But what it comes down to is eating a whole foods diet and following the USDA dietary guidelines around the MyPlate, which I really should end with the MyPlate picture. The MyPlate gives the best visual in terms of eating a whole food. It's half of it is fruits and vegetables, and then partial whole grains, and the goal is to reduce or limit the amount of processed meat, and so you make your own decisions around it. But there's a lot of great resources out there, not one specific resource though. That was a really long answer to your question. I don't think I mentioned a carcinogen. Did I mention a carcinogen? Our lecture states omega-3s being very positive, omega-6s being very destructive. But their recommended ratio is still 4:1, omega-6 to omega-3. Why is that? That is the question. Beth, do you do the fat lecture, any of the fats modules? I can share this question. The question is, our lecture states omega-3s being very positive, omega-6s being very destructive. Well, both the fats, omega-3s and omega-6s, are essential, meaning we need to get them from our diet. Our body does not make them. And omega-3s are more difficult to obtain in the diet because they're so much more limited in food sources, but omega-6s are a lot more prolific. They're found in vegetable oils, vegetables, where omega-3s are really in a small amount of food. And so in terms of omega-6s, the ratio tends to be higher in omega-6s. I think a big part of that has to do with the amount of vegetable oils just that end up happening to occur in our food naturally. But the goal should always be to incorporate omega-3s in, just because most of us aren't eating large sources of omega-3s, which you're getting from flax seeds and chia seeds and fatty fish, and a lot of people end up relying on omega-3 supplements or fish oil supplements in order to obtain those essential fatty acids. Is citric acid a bad ingredient or ascorbic acid? Well, ascorbic acid is essentially vitamin C. I don't know if that's is a question, but let's see. What else? Any other questions?
Yeah, I'll just add, when you think about citric acid or ascorbic acid, it's an acid. It's an acidic component. So it's similar to vinegar or orange juice, except that it's been isolated and is used as a preservative. So the answer is, I'm depending on your definition of bad, it's not bad, it's just acidic and therefore provides an environment that helps preserve the food.
Yeah, thanks, Beth. I think that's the that's the overall tone of the slide deck is, a lot of food companies will use citric acid in order to prevent browning or to maintain the integrity of the food, because once you cut or process a food, especially a fruit or vegetable, and that's often the case with citric acid or ascorbic acid, it's used to maintain, let's say, for example, cut apples. We want our apples to be cut and to not brown for us, and so something gets added in order to maintain the integrity of the food. Any other questions?
I missed what you said about the sulfites and the sodium benzoate. I can't pronounce that. But what's negative about those preservatives?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of background noise when I was talking about sodium benzoate and sulfates. There's not necessarily anything negative. It's just some people end up saying that they have a food sensitivity to them, particularly sulfites, which I mentioned are in dried fruits, but also in wine. And a lot of people say that they have some kind of food sensitivity to them, which ends up being generally some kind of rash, or it's not generally digestive related. And then if you've ever the last time I did a lecture, I talked about food intolerances, and generally food intolerances are demonstrated in a GI distress kind of situation. Sulfites generally cause skin rashes, maybe a little bit of a flush, but there are some people that report having a sensitivity to sulfites. Any other questions? Somebody said they have a huge reaction to what they believe is citric acid. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it's good to recognize what doesn't work in your diet, and if you can isolate the ingredient, it makes it a lot easier for sure.
Monosodium glutamate. My mom has an allergy to that. She says she gets the worst headaches. And I know that they put that on labels. They can just put it as spices, and it's in the label spices. What category, what's the negative effects from monosodium glutamate?
I can speak a little to that, unless you want to, Michelle.
Go for it, Beth.
Just because, so monosodium glutamate it's weird because this reaction and the Chinese food syndrome and all this hype about it started in the 60s or 70s because of an opinion article that a doctor put in JAMA or some medical journal. Don't quote me on that. And it started this whole trend with monosodium glutamate being bad for you. Since then, there's no proof that there's anything negative about it in the scientific literature. However, there is so much anecdotal evidence that people have a reaction to MSG, which is something that I think is produced naturally in the body. It's, and so when it's added, there are people who have headaches or burning sensation on their shoulders. And so it's, the answer is scientifically, there's no evidence saying, and that doctor eventually retracted what he wrote. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Michelle. It's MSG is just one of those kind of interesting things because it provides, if you don't know, it provides the umami, and it could be a good salt substitute. And so when it's used, it could actually have health benefits if you can tolerate it.
So it's not bad then.
No, it's not, except that there are, there's so much evidence that some people have a bad reaction to it.
And yeah, I'm actually one of those people. It's interesting because it's as Beth mentioned, it's a glutamate, and glutamates do naturally occur in our body and in nature. So it goes under the category of glutamates. And often if MSG has been removed from a product, they're just using another glutamate. It's not that they're eliminating all glutamates. But because of this press in the late 60s, monosodium glutamate became the target. But I will say that a lot of the association and perhaps the reaction ends up coming more from the foods that are that have MSG are often very high in salt. And you know, I know it's interesting. I can tell you if I've had MSG. It's something that we go back to a label, and I'm really careful about it, but it's a very different headache that I get. So you know, it's like I had mentioned to Kim, if you know, or maybe Katie, if you know the ingredient that doesn't work for you, then you know, it's something that you avoid. But like Beth said, it's, you know, scientifically it hasn't been proven to really be an issue. When I eat Kim says, when I eat strawberries or gummy bears, my head starts sweating. It's bizarre, so it's something mental or processed. Yeah, I know in my years working as a dietitian and working with many people with food sensitivities, I've seen a lot of people have sensitivities to strawberries as well. We had just a funny little story. We had a chef. So when we used to work at Cornell Dining, we had a Chinese chef that was so insistent on putting MSG in the food. And in my time there, we really wanted to clean the labels and make it transparent that we were putting MSG in the food. We actually eliminated all MSG eventually on campus. But he would carry around a little baggie of MSG in his pocket, and he would sneak it into the food before service. So we could not claim it because we didn't know, but he swore it was why he had the longest line of any of the stations. So, you know, if there's really that big of a problem, there are countries that, you know, eat large amounts of MSG. So, okay, so another comment or question. My mother and I have rheumatoid arthritis and we cannot eat MSG. We suffer terribly with joint aches and swelling. So you guys notice a difference with MSG? Yeah, I recently moved, and I've been working with a different organization, and a chef made me a meal, and I didn't know you know, I didn't look at the ingredients. Having been with Cornell Dining for so many years, I knew there was no MSG. So probably about an hour or two later, I had this headache that was mind numbing. And once I came home, I had to lie down. And I mean, at that point, I can't take ibuprofen. It's just too bad. It's usually I have to sleep it out. And I said to my husband when I got home, I said, I didn't check to see if there's MSG in the food. And it was Mexican rice, which is, some people use the Mexican rice, the box mix with the yellow little spice packet. It's got MSG in it. Yeah, and so I went back, and sure enough, they were using that box mix. And so, you know, it's just an ingredient that I've pretty much eliminated. Any other questions, comments, stories? Keep in mind too, you've got 2 nutrition instructors here. So if you guys have questions about the overall nutrition certificate, feel free to ask questions regarding that as well. Yeah, Kimberly mentioned ibuprofen is actually a cancer drug, and long-term people have horrible reactions. Okay, any other thoughts or comments? Questions? No? Okay. Well, Beth, any other thoughts or final stories before we?
No, if I could say how much I love facilitating these classes, and I love the idea that we're inviting people from all 6 of them to come to these office hours once a month. If you do have any topics that you wish we would cover, we're a little bit limited through eCornell. We're not allowed to add too much content to Dr. Levitsky's class, but certainly if there's something you're interested in, let us know. Because you're taking 6 3-week classes, you will have 6 opportunities for these 1-hour sessions where we can do some value added. And so it's a pleasure to be here.
So each month you guys do a new class, and it invites everybody taking the nutrition and healthy living course, or is there other courses that join this?
No, it's just the nutrition and healthy living. So there are only a couple of classes on eCornell that are Cornell classes, and so this is one of them. Some of the other classes that are offered on eCornell aren't part of the Division of Nutritional Sciences. And so this Healthy Living certificate, I don't know if everybody realizes this, but it follows along the Intro to Nutrition class that the freshmen take. And these are students who might be interested in majoring in nutrition. So it's kind of a very high level overview, as you probably have figured out, with lots, by the time you finish up this certificate, you probably have more questions than answers in terms of what's happening in the field of nutrition right now. So we do invite everyone from all 6 of those classes. There are 4 instructors, so Michelle and I are 2 of them, and we rotate amongst each other. And we just we give you an opportunity to ask questions and answers, but we wrap it around a topic that involves an area of our personal expertise.
Okay.
And then we record these, so we'll send them out. If you ever can't make one, you can still get the recording.
The BHA and BHT, is that what it'll show on the label, or is it a long name?
No, it's just BHA, BHT. Sometimes they're together, sometimes it's one or the other. but it's literally just it's abbreviated.
So human carcinogen, that's those are like cancerous. Is that like cancerous causing ingredient?
The so BHA is listed by the National Toxicology Program as reasonably anticipated to be a human carcinogen, but that is in large quantities. So when we say large quantities compared to the GRAS or GRAS quantities, it's a very, very, very different amount. And so usually you're only getting BHA or BHT in ingredients. Oftentimes it's meat ingredients that have fats that are going to very easily go rancid. A great example is like a processed turkey burger. If you have you get a frozen processed turkey burger, the goal is to have it be shelf stable in the freezer for up to 3 months. And so the BHA, BHT really helps to keep the fat from oxidizing. In your fat module, you guys probably talk about how easily fats go rancid. They go bad. Fats go bad really easily, and so food manufacturing needs to eliminate the possibility of rancidity, and that's really a big reason why BHA BHT is used. Alpha tocopherol, otherwise known as vitamin E, is often used also as an antioxidant for those fats, but like I had mentioned, some companies avoid it because of cost.
Mm.
Yeah, so any other questions, comments? Thanks for all your great questions. All right, what do you think? Beth? Wrap it up. If you guys, as Beth mentioned, we really appreciate any thoughts or comments about topics. We try to keep topics. Generally, we talk about 10 to 15 minutes and then open it up to questions, but we're trying to cover the gamut when it comes to different topics. I think Aaron Rice covers omega-3. Somebody else had a question about omega-3s. I think one of his topics is omega-3s, a deeper dive for sure. All right. Well, thanks for joining us. And I will send around a recording, but I'll also have the slide deck available and send that to all of the instructors so they'll be able to send it out to anyone that's involved in the certificate. So thanks everyone for joining us.
Bye.